Hi, my name is Ken, and you're watching Mastering UX. On this episode, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about personas, specifically ad hoc personas. Personas, I feel, are a real staple in any major UX process. But at the same time, I do feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about personas and pain points regarding getting started with personas. So I wanted to break this down into 4 points. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what ad hoc personas are. Wanted to share with you a little bit of why I feel that personas can often fail. And then I wanted to give you a primer for what would make a successful persona project. And then the last thing is, I'd like to leave you off with how to utilize personas. So if we look at a definition, I believe there's many definitions out there, but this is one that I'm going to give you. So a persona is a fictional yet realistic description of a typical or target user of a website or system. A persona is an archetype instead of an actual living human, but personas should be described as if they were real people. Some of the words in bold I'd like to call out to you. Personas are fictional, yet they're realistic. And I think this is a point that people often get hung up on. I think sometimes people may fear that our personas are not representative enough, they're not dead accurate. They vacillate on specific features. And I think something we need to remember is that we're the ones that are designing these personas. And this leads me to the next point. Personas are target users for the business. One of the things that makes a successful persona is simply that we feel that the set of personas we've generated would be the good test. If we could make these ones happy, that they would satisfy our business goals. So I want to share with you just a very typical persona template. I'm sure you've seen a lot of them out there. At the very top, there is a title that says Connor, the content creator. I think a lot of people may feel that this is kind of cheesy. There's no need to kind of do something like this. It's too cutesy. But, I want to emphasize that coming up with something memorable is really important with a persona. And I think what we have to keep in mind is some people will remember many details about the personas, but several of the stakeholders that are going to be consuming personas will only remember the title. And so this persona is broken down into a couple of categories. You see that there's a quote, and this quote also can be something that's very short, a very quick thought, sentiment regarding what the user may say. And then there's the background, goals and motivators, challenges, technology habits, and role models. Something I wanted to emphasize here is, each persona can be customized according to your project. In this particular instance, I just want to give you a sample. If we were doing something like a content creator, it might make sense to have a category called role models. Either no, to be honest, I've never seen role models on any other persona. So personas are something that are very general. They're high level. They are something that can give us a snapshot of what the goals and motivations of the person's pain points that they're facing. But also just feel free to customize the personas according to your particular project. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, specifically what is an ad hoc persona. So something you need to keep in mind is personas, they kind of fall into a spectrum. At the, easiest spectrum, you could have personas that really are very lightweight. They may involve no research, and typically we call these proto personas. Then you might have qualitative personas, and those personas may involve some qualitative research. And then I'd like to introduce to you a persona type called the ad hoc persona. The ad hoc persona is like a qualitative persona, but it adds in a few dimensions that caters a little bit more to the business, and it also has a methodology to cause the stakeholders to be more invested into your personas. So, at the highest, most complex, most high budget, time consuming persona, we have research based personas. And these personas involve quantitative research. As you know, quantitative research, sometimes it can be very difficult to obtain and then also analyze. It's also very time consuming, and research based personas are very useful when you have a situation where representation and the percentage of users and accuracy is of utmost importance. To give you a little example, I work with a colleague, and he told me about doing personas for Lifetime Fitness. I don't want to, reveal anything about it, and I'll just make up my own kind of characteristics about that kind of persona. But one thing that came to mind is Lifetime Fitness has customers of all different kinds. There's customers that are maybe first time in the gym. They may feel insecure about going into the gym. They may not know much, and they also may not want to be judged for not being very proficient at using machines. And then on the other spectrum, you may have a person who is very aggressive about going into the gym. In fact, going to the gym is this person's life. This person's very serious, wants an atmosphere. So, Lifetime Fitness, when they're catering to their customers, their percentages matter a lot and who they're catering to. They want to know who their audience is, but they also want to know, how they might want to balance things. They have even different customers that have even competing wants and needs. And so, in this kind of situation where you have a large, diverse user base and very many wants and needs, and how to divide the wants and needs can be perplexing, and there can be even controversy if a certain persona type gravitates towards certain kinds of wants and needs. This is where you're really going to want to validate your research with a lot of study, and back it up with qualitative insights with the quantitative research that you've already done. So I just wanted to emphasize, usually you don't have the time or the budget, or the business doesn't have the appetite to invest this much into a project. So I kind of find that ad hoc personas really fall in the sweet spot of personas that are validated. They have some insights. They help you further along in your discovery process. Yet they can be done quite quickly. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some common reasons for failure. One is having a lack of definition of done or success. I mean, isn't it kind of funny when you kind of consider what is a good persona? What would give you the idea that you're done with personas? How do you know if you have too many or too little? These are kind of questions that I feel like we don't talk about a lot, and I think it's hopefully this video will give you a little bit of insight into what kind of things you should be looking for. The next point is forgetting personas are designed. And I think I talked about this. I think the perfectionists I myself am a designer, and sometimes I get caught up in the weeds and trying to perfect things. But I think when you're creating a persona, we have to realize they don't need to be a masterpiece. There's no such thing as perfection. These are something that we are designing according to a particular purpose, and we're also designing with a particular timeline. The next point I wanted to bring out was you really need to tie personas to business goals. Personas, yes, they are about capturing the empathy, but if you want stakeholders and everyone to be involved in there, then there has to be something that's rooted in business priority or the project goal. The last point that I think is a point of failure is all too often you just see personas, they're just not being used. Oftentimes, I see personas printed out beautifully. They're framed. They're well designed. It looks like there is professional stock photography, very unique layout. And honestly, no one is talking about the personas. No one's referring to the personas. No one remembers the personas. And so, in this light, you kind of see that the personas, I would have to say, functionally are a failure. So I wanted to bring you to a certain way of how you can define success. And the way to define success for a user persona is I think you need to map your business objectives to user needs. So over on the right side, you see that there's prioritized features. And then over on the left side, you see that there's business goals. And right down the middle, you see that there's user personas. So I believe that user personas are the recipients of the business goals. When you're writing your business goals, which narrow down to a project goal, those project goals should be a litmus test that if your personas have if your personas would be the right target for your project and business goals, then I think your personas are on to something. And then over on the right side with the prioritized features, your persona should aim to generate every feature that you would create in this project. And this particular feature set is done in a unique way. You can kind of see that there's rows. There's feature one, feature two, feature three. And then along the columns, there's persona one, persona two, persona three. And then there's a cumulative score, which determines the prioritization. And so I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but you can kind of see that the personas at the top, they have a weighting of different points. And then the features have a point per persona. And then what you do is you add up the points with all the personas per feature, and that generates a score in the green lettering, and that can help you determine prioritization. It's a very valuable tool, but it's also something that can get the business very engaged in. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how to go about creating a persona. So let's say you're starting off on a project. The first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to talk to the business, and you're going to want to validate that the business has goals, and see if those goals are clear, see if they need any kind of modification or revisions. And then, I believe the business, they're a good place to start to kind of get some general idea of what would be some candidate personas. And so talking with the business, maybe, doing some kind of preliminary work of generating some very, very high level personas with maybe just one paragraph, and then beginning to talk to the business and see if there's some things that make sense, and trying to pare those personas down to the right number. Something I should have covered in the previous graphic was, I think you should try to shoot for 5 to 7 personas. If you have too many personas, they're just not memorable. And if you have too little personas, there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to generate the kind of the features that the project deserves. So going back, so let's say you're talking to the business, and you get some idea of a hypothesis of what kind of candidate personas might be something that sticks. Then you're going to want to schedule some interviews, work this out with the business, and in doing these interviews, you're going to really they're just qualitative interviews, spending some time on finding out their general wants and needs, and particularly honing in on those needs that are related to your particular project. And you're also going to want to generate some insights. And then you might get some more clues about some revisions that need to be made to your personas. You may find that you want to create some more personas, or consolidate some personas. So, the business get you started, the interviews kind of do some validation, and then you're able to, when you talk to these candidate persona user types, then you can come back to the business and tell them what you're hearing, and make some proposals and recommendations based on some research that's qualitative. So at this point, after you've done some kind of back and forth, doing some interviews, doing some kind of preliminary work, working with the business, the next step that I'd recommend is that set up a workshop. The reason why you want to have a workshop with personas is this is the part about getting the business buy-in. By getting the business involved with the creation of the personas, they have a vested interest. And part of that workshop, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have a section where after validating your personas and getting a consensus on the personas, you're going to want to have a time where you score the personas. So, what you're going to do is give a sheet of paper, allow each stakeholder to write down, to basically spend 100 points on the, say, let's say 7 personas that you created. And with those personas that you created, you're going to instruct them to kind of divide those up. My recommendation is that you would instruct the business to make sure that they don't peanut butter spread, I call it, kind of make the points 20 20 20, and there's not much distinction between the personas, and really not be afraid to give 50 points to a persona that you really feel is the most important persona. There is just a tendency for people to kind of to give very very close ratings. And then you're going to want to go back and take everything that you gained and design those personas, and maybe put special nuances around different categories, things you want to emphasize, and you're going to want to put this into a PowerPoint presentation and present this back to the business and get a final review on these personas. So the picture I'm trying to paint with you is this process of working with the business, getting the business involved, validating with the users, getting qualitative insights, and then going to a larger stakeholder base and getting them involved, and then getting them especially involved with scoring those personas, which is going to directly it's going to directly have a bearing on which features are going to be tackled first. And so in this kind of way, you get a lot of accountability and participation throughout the process. So hopefully these kind of activities, and of course this is not something that's written in stone, but I wanted to give you just kind of a template for something that you might want to consider. Of course, sometimes projects are already, in the middle. Sometimes there's very little known. Sometimes you really need to start from the beginning. There's all these different factors. And I would even say always be willing to improvise your process, improvise the personas, and be willing to be flexible to come up with something that's going to work for all the different parties involved in consuming the personas and creating the personas. So I wanted to leave you off with this matter of how do you utilize personas. I think this is a really important point. If you're working in Agile, a lot of times you have user stories, and those user stories, they start off with as a user. Well, why not start off that user story with as Connie, the content creator, and begin to put the personas in people's faces, work with the personas, socialize the personas, be thinking about the personas, because those user stories are meant to have empathy built into them and get us to consider the why. And so why not add your user personas into those? Of course, this takes some you got to work with your development team and the business to make sure that everyone feels good about the process. The next point, I've covered this, but it's to make the stakeholders weight the stories. This really brings in the buy-in, and this makes persona something that's not just fluffy and empathetic only, but rather it gives it a sobriety, kind of a weightiness, that the weighting of these personas is going to determine the prioritization of a real world project. And then the next point, I brought this out, the feature matrix. So after you've done the weighting, you create your features, you score those, and this is something that as a team you can have debates, and by filling out this feature matrix and getting others involved, they're also getting more vested and more familiarized with these personas. And then the next thing I'd like to mention is that, always mention your personas. If you're doing an insight presentation, or if you're presenting some research findings that you've done, use your personas. Mention them again, remind people of specific personas or what personas we're specifically doing research on. And after you've done that research, let them know that these particular participants kind of reflected, these three personas. And then finally, what I'd like to leave you off is don't be afraid to revise them. Personas are not holy. So, anyways, hope that leaves you with something that would be a primer for success. I think personas are very critical to any larger project. So, I hope you could take some of these points and be more successful in your UX journey.